Hello, friends. Welcome to the Pendragon Foundation. My name is Nathan Hood. I am the chairman of the Pendragon Foundation, which exists to rebuild Britain's strongholds. Our mission is to restore and transform castles from around the United Kingdom and see them become once more centres of culture, commerce, and community. We are thoroughly committed to this vision as a volunteer organisation. And in this stream, I want to kind of go over who we are in a bit more detail. There's already videos on the channel explaining in a short format who we are and what we're about. But here I can go into a bit more detail about our vision, how we work, and how we're going to implement our ideas, see our end goal completed. And then we will have some time to answer or discuss questions that you have, to answer your queries and explain how you can get involved in the Pendragon Foundation. And we'll probably go for about an hour in length, so that gives you a rough idea of what we're expecting in this stream. I guess a starting point for what the Pendragon Foundation is about is our aim, the castles. We are passionate about Britain's castles because they are our nation's history in stone. Many of them go right back to the Norman conquest, when William the Conqueror in 1066 took the crown of England, and then he and his Norman kin established a series of fortifications around the country, which then became the basis for later developments under the Plantagenets, such as Henry II and Edward I. And these towering monuments, these bastions of stone, have seen so many things, from battles and sieges and warfare to being the heart of administrative and cultural life in the medieval era. Many courts were held in castles, for example. There would be, and when I say courts, I mean that in two senses: both the legal court, where the lord would be a judge over the crimes various people had allegedly committed, but also courts in the sense that they were centres of music and art and poetry and patronage. So all of these things, all of the kind of life of the medieval era, a lot of it was taking place inside the castle. And so when we talk about these being history in stone, it's not just a military history, although that is, of course, quite important to the development of castles. It's also the life of the medieval era and later. Because, of course, as castles became obsolete as military fortifications due to the invention of things like the cannonball, which could puncture a hole in a castle wall quite easily, they took on more and more civic functions, either as places of residence or as meeting points for, again, cultural and intellectual activity. Over the centuries, their purposes have changed. But nonetheless, many of us, I think, have this deep connection to castles. I can certainly remember as a child going to visit my first castle. I think it was Warwick Castle, and we went there on a school holiday. I was history mad. I used to read the horrible histories books, and so I was really looking forward to this. And the impression I got of seeing those mighty towers as we came down from the car park towards the castle, it just inspired me with a dream of being a knight and fighting dragons and so on. I think many of us still have that to some degree, whether it's in that childlike way I've just described, or seeing them as part of our home, as part of what belongs to us as a people, as a community, and as a nation. Castles feature as part of our where we belong. That they are an important part of where we belong and how we relate to it, both in terms of the past, how we see the past, but how it informs us now and in the future. And so these are really precious places to maintain. Many of these castles are hundreds, if not thousands of years old. And we one of the things that has kind of changed over time is how people think about preserving castles and other historic buildings. It's actually relatively recent that the conservation movement has developed. It was in the late 19th century when figures like William Morris were quite concerned by the effects of industrialization, when they saw landowners tearing down historic buildings and monuments in the name of building houses and factories, that they got quite serious about establishing organizations such as the National Trust or the Society for the Protection of Antique Buildings to defend our built environment, to secure the future of our historic buildings. And others like John Ruskin, Thomas Carlyle, Edward Burne-Jones, William Holman Hunt, many others got involved in these efforts. In the 1900s, the laws started to change within the United Kingdom. There was a concerted legal effort to protect certain buildings, first beginning with Neolithic, then medieval. But in time, there was a recognition that most buildings from the past should be put under consideration for whether they should be protected. This has then since developed further. In the 1980s and 90s, there was a fellow working in Australia called John Semple Kerr, and he was a key influence or introduced a series of conceptions about conservation, which have since gone on to inform almost all of the practice done in England and Britain today. His basic suggestion was that conservation isn't just a preservation of a building. It's not just making sure that the building survives and is able to continue standing. It's actually about preserving the significance of that building. It's about ensuring that the thing that makes that building valuable isn't just preserved, but is actually enhanced. It is actually allowed to have its most fullest expression. So it's not just a non-intervention perspective where we hold back and only do the minimum to keep this building alive. We actually want to do more and see this building flourish in terms of its significance. Now, I keep using this word significance, which for those of you who know UK planning law, this is quite an important concept. And what it fundamentally gets down to is, what is the special interest or value or worth of a particular building? Historic England outline several areas in which a building can have significance, particularly in a heritage context. The first of these is evidential. An evidential significance is one that if you went to that place and you did archaeological research, you might find something which informs our historical understanding of a time period. So there's a prospect that if we dug up the ground there, we might find swords or Neolithic spears or food items or utensils, etc., etc. Then there is a historical significance, and this kind of can be broken down into two ways. On the one hand, a building could be historically significant because it's associated with a particular individual or group. So, for example, the house of John Lennon. It's not architecturally significant. It's not particularly beautiful. But why is it significant? Well, John Lennon lived there. Now, with castles, this can be the case in many instances. So, Berwick Castle, for example, was built by Edward I, and he stayed there for many weeks. Alternatively, Berwick Castle was the site of many sieges, and so it has an important association, both with an individual and with its military history. Again, there is another historical significance, and that is a illustrative focus. So in that case, we might say, well, Berwick Castle is indicative of a style of castle building which is typical of the late 13th century and the early 14th century. Why is this? Well, it has no keep. Early castles have keeps. Later castles do not tend to have keeps. So this castle illustrates a style of castle building which it is interesting, significant to preserve. And we could expand that to other areas as well. Then we move on to other things, other values. They may have an aesthetic value. The castle's architecture may be particularly beautiful, may be particularly elegant and worthy of preservation. Additionally, a building might have a beauty insofar as it's connected to its landscape. So it's not just the building and its particular architecture in terms of the materials and form of it, but it's also the landscape upon which it sits and how it relates to it. So if you find a castle with an amazing, sitting in an amazing vista or in a valley which has rolling fields, then the setting is architecturally significant too. These three areas, evidential, historical, and aesthetic, are largely considered within the planning policy legislation of the United Kingdom and would be factored in to any assessment of a restoration project. But there is a fourth area which Historic England, who are the body widely responsible for looking after most of the preservation of the material heritage environment, they add another area, which is the communal significance of a heritage property. And this could be a commemorative significance. So perhaps a war memorial might have a commemorative significance insofar as people go there to remember those who have died in various world wars. It could have a social significance, so it's a meeting place for a local community where maybe there's certain activities that take place there which bring the community together. Or it could have a religious function, so a church would have a religious communal significance. Why am I explaining all of this? Well, this matters because when a restoration project is proposed, a planning committee, a local planning committee, will consider whether the restoration preserves and or enhances the significance of that historical building. And so when you're proposing a restoration work, unless you have very good reason to violate one of these things, actually what you should be aiming to do is to do something which brings out more fully the significance of the heritage, of the historic environment. And that's quite important to everything that Pendragon is committed to. We really believe that these castles are significant, that they have a historical significance, that they are architecturally significant, and that they have a communal value. And we really want to not just preserve them, but actually see them flourish and highlighting these things more fully for local communities. With that in mind, I want to kind of turn to some of the challenges that castles are facing at this current point. Because it might be easy to think, well, there are organizations already out there which look after castles that exist to preserve and enhance the significance of these places. Why would we need a new one? What is it that Pendragon's offering that somewhere like English Heritage or the National Trust is not? Well, I think the first point to that kind of question is that actually these major institutions are facing significant financial struggles at this point in time. Let me share with you some recent articles to this point. So this is in the Telegraph, inside the Civil War in English heritage, which has brought its chief down. And if we go to this paragraph, we can see why the current head of English heritage has decided to resign, or in part. This comes in the wake of English Heritage announcing earlier this year they are planning around 189 redundancies from a workforce of 2,535, which represents a cut of 7%. The charity also announced cuts to winter opening hours at a series of sites, with an additional 22 sites to become hidden gems with limited openings. So what's happening here is the workforce of English Heritage is being reduced. And also several sites that they operate are going to have a limited accessibility. It's going to be harder to go to them. This is because their revenue is going downwards. Let's look at another example. The National Trust, another organization set up in 1885 to preserve historic buildings. The National Trust to cut at least 550 jobs after the £10 million rise in costs from Reeves' budget. The conservation charity, which looks after 500 historic houses, castles, parks and gardens, said a rise of more than £10 million in cost of employers' national insurance and minimum wage in April had outstripped an increase in income from visitors. The cuts will affect 6% of its 11,000 strong workforce, the equivalent of 550 full-time jobs. Staff were informed of the cuts in an online briefing on Thursday as a 45-day consultation began. And if we skip down further, we can see that it's not just English Heritage and the National Trust which are suffering at this point in time. There are other organisations like the Tate, which is tied to the nation's art galleries. 4 art galleries across London, Liverpool and Cornwall this year announced plans to cut 7% of its workforce because of a funding deficit left over from the coronavirus pandemic. So we can see that many of the institutions which are responsible for looking after our castles are currently struggling financially. They're having to cut their workforce, and at the same time, they're having to close places to the public. And these articles don't mention it, but I personally know, and I've spoken to many people, and I'm sure that maybe you might know this, that there are many sites which are just seem to be permanently closed to the public. This is often done through closing them for restoration work or because they're too dangerous. And so in theory, it's because of a safety reason, but it's also because of the finances. They don't have the funds to staff those places, and so they don't feel they can open them without a staff member present. So it's having a significant impact upon the operations of these two organizations and the ability of the public to engage with them. Now, why are these things happening? Why is there such a decline in these organizations? Now, we've already come across a couple of these in the articles themselves, at least that's been suggested. One is the coronavirus pandemic, which led to a widespread closure of historic places. People could not go and visit them. And so the revenue from these places took a severe hit, and many organizations are still recovering from that episode. Another factor is inflation. Inflation has been high, and this leads to higher costs, particularly energy costs, which have been impacted by the war in Ukraine. There is also as been indicated here, the Labour government's budget seems to have had an impact in certain places, particularly around paying employees. So that has had additional costs which these organizations cannot bear. I think that although these articles don't mention it, there is evidence that the These places primarily rely on tourism and events. And ever since the COVID pandemic, tourism has not reached its pre-pandemic levels. Visitors have not returned in the numbers that they were prior to the pandemic. And in general, there's a change in the demographics of those who are attending these places. I found this quite surprising, but actually prior to the pandemic, the the main group who would attend castles and historic places were 30-year-olds, 30-year-olds with children. So it's your family day out. But this has changed. After the pandemic, families are a declining group, and it is over 60s who are the main group attending castles today. This is in part because of the rising costs. It's much easier for those with disposable income who tend to be of an older generation to be able to visit somewhere like a castle, whereas a family cannot so easily afford it. But I think there's another factor here as well, which is that younger people tend to have less engagement with historic buildings, less affiliation with them, less interaction with them. A third of under 30s have never attended a castle in their life. I'll repeat that. A third of people under 30 in the United Kingdom have never attended a castle. So as that group enters into family life, they are less and less exposed and less engaged with these places. And we could go into a whole manner of reasons as to why that is the case. A lack of opportunity is often cited as one. One reason, perhaps schools are unwilling to take people to such places anymore. The cost of getting there, the barriers in terms of feeling that it's not a place that's really meant for you, a lack of interest. Other things such as social media and streaming services and video games allow you to engage with historic places without ever going to them. Indeed, you can pretend to be a medieval knight in Kingdom Come Deliverance, or a king conquering the world in Crusader Kings 2 without ever setting foot in a castle. So these are potential factors in the decline of engagement. Whatever the reasons, and I think that it's hard to pin it down to one thing or to have a clear understanding at this point. Whatever the reasons, there is a decline in engagement. And I think this trend looks like it's going to continue for the foreseeable future, especially if young people are less engaged at this point than previous generations. So the future of castles looks uncertain with these financial considerations impacting the bodies most responsible for looking after them. And aside from these major organizations, we have two other groups who are being impacted by costs quite severely. One are councils. Councils own a lot of historic buildings, and these include castles. And councils are constantly under pressure with their budgets. They struggle to use their budgets effectively, and their budgets seem to be ever decreasing in the face of inflation. So it is unlikely that they are able to really sustain their care of castles long term. Additionally, private ownership is being affected by this, as many of the families whose ancestors built and own these castles are unable to sustain funding them. And so, as we will see a little later, there are several castles constantly on the market. I think one that came up in the last year, which caused quite a splash, was Ripley Castle. Ripley Castle, which was put on the market for £21 million. And this was the historic seat of the family who lived there. And they had decided that they couldn't run it anymore. It was time to sell it. So all of these groups are going to struggle to maintain these very often expensive to maintain buildings. So the future is uncertain, with closures expected, potential deterioration. Indeed, the head of the National Lottery Fund, which is the main grant giver for heritage restoration, has suggested that our historic buildings are in their worst state for 50 years. There's also a spike in vandalism at these sites in the last 6 months to a year. So there's some real existential questions about the funding and survival of a lot of our historic buildings. So that's one factor here. The current model doesn't work. It's not going to be able to sustain many of our castles. So we can't just rely on the old institutions to keep going. There needs to be a different way of approaching the problems, a new way that we can find good solutions to how we sustain and secure the future of Britain's castles. I think, though, that there is a second issue here, maybe a deeper issue, a cultural issue, which, even if castles were financially secure, is worthy of profound consideration. And that is how castles have been turned into tourist destinations. English Heritage, the National Trust, private owners, councils, they primarily market castles as places to visit for a fun day out. Now, this can range in the kind of experience that they try to cultivate, but places like Alnwick Castle, Warwick Castle, these are all whole live history experiences where you can go and talk to knights and see damsels in distress. You can see them practice the ancient crafts and jousting with each other and so on. It's all very exciting. It's all very enjoyable. But what it does is it takes something which is part of our heritage, part of our home, something which is shared by the British people, and more regionally, each area, each community shares as part of their heritage, part of their past, part of what their ancestors built and have passed on to them to pass on to their descendants. It's kind of abstracted from that and taken away and commodified. Some might even say Disneyfied. It becomes a sanitized, a safe, and commodity to consume, which people from all over the country and all around the world come to visit, and they have a nice time, and then they go away again. They take and consume a lively experience. They try to get a taste of authenticity, and then they leave again, and it has no bearing upon their everyday lives. So this castle then becomes abstracted from the community in which it is located, and it has no impact. It's removed from the domestic setting or from the work setting of many people. You go to the castle at the weekend, it's then in a bubble, ossified, remaining static. And then you go back to your normal life, where you work in an office or in a factory, where you go to chill out at the pub or at the cinema or in your house. The castle has no kind of impact on these areas of your life. It seems cut out of it. And so by cutting it out as just keeping it as a tourist place, we lose that connection to our history in stone, to a beautiful building which is connected to our own origins, to the people who came before us, to our home. We lose that physical connection to our home. And that is a really sad thing. That is something which demands questioning. And in the future on this channel, we hope to explore more of those issues more fully around tourism and how a tourist economy, while it can generate a lot of income, can often lead to the people who live in those areas not just feeling dispossessed, but being dispossessed of their history, of their heritage, of the architecture that belongs to them. So these organizations have all pursued this touristification of our castles. And this is quite a detrimental thing. And I think that's partly why many of those statistics about young people not engaging with castles are what they are, because they are just there for an experience. But if you can have just as good an experience, or an even better experience, by simulating it through a video game or watching a movie, then you automatically lose that connection with something that actually should be quite foundational to who you are, or fundamental to your connectedness to, or your dwelling in a particular place. So these are kind of two interrelated challenges that castles face today. On the one hand, their future is very uncertain due to financial considerations. On the other hand, they've been abstracted and formed into tourist destinations, which thus leave local people feeling a lack of ownership and connection and rootedness with those buildings. Enter the Pendragon Foundation. Our organization is a voluntary-based organization. We don't employ anybody, and in the long term, our aim is to really build upon our voluntary networks. This allows us to be a lot more dynamic and adaptable to situations than other organizations. It also allows us to reduce our costs. And it allows us to be a bit more widespread and decentralized. We don't need to have a central command unit ordering people all around the country in the ways that they operate. Rather, we can empower passionate people to take an active role in preserving and enhancing their historic buildings. And again, I come back to that point then, enhancing the significance of historic buildings. Remember what I was talking about earlier in terms of the significance of buildings, and how heritage and conservation is not just about preserving a physical structure, but bringing out these things more fully, and perhaps adding new significance to buildings too. This is a really important point. A restoration isn't just rebuilding a building exactly how it was. It's not even rebuilding a building so that it can survive. It's actually making a historic building fit for purpose. It's making a historic building fit for purpose. And that purpose doesn't have to be fixed. Providing that you are working in a way which is compatible with the existing significance of that building, you can imagine new possibilities for the building. You could make it a center for culture, as it was once before. Could castles be exhibition space, workshop space, a place for artists to come together and collaborate and to show their work? And when I say artists, this could be visual art, it could be performance art, it could be digital art even. Could it be musical as well? These are, and can this tie into traditional crafts connected to castles? I've spoken as well about commerce. Could castles be catalysts for new kinds of businesses which engage with castles as historic structures, maybe the land that they're situated on, and make the most of the communities around them? There's a whole host of opportunities at castles that haven't really been explored yet, or if they have, it's been in dribs and drabs, rather than taking this as a kind of hub which could be used to generate multiple businesses for local communities, providing services, for example. So I'll mention one example here, which I think is quite one that shows the kind of innovative approach we're taking, but also gets the imagination fired. In New York, there is currently an organization called NYC Mesh, and they are offering the service of being an internet provider. You sign up with them, they install a router in your premises, whether it's a house or a business, and they deliver cheap and reliable internet access. And what's really great about this is the internet access is provided by local people, so you can actually like go and see them if you're having a problem with your internet. It's cheaper than other forms of internet provider. It's reliable, but it's also allowing local people to have control over their internet and got to really make it their own. It's not something delivered by a multinational corporation. It's people taking charge of the resources which make their home lives, their work lives function. And I should add as well that the internet service is totally secure and private and doesn't take anyone's information. So could a castle in a town, say Tamworth Castle, one of the most significant castles in Britain, that's in the middle of a town. Could that be a centre where you are offering local internet provision? Or Newcastle Castle, that's right in the centre of Newcastle city centre. Could that be offering the businesses all around there a cheap, reliable, and local internet service? Perhaps. But this is the sort of thing that could be being offered from a castle. It has the space to create businesses. And it's also an opportunity to reconnect communities with their local historic environment. If there are events which take place in the community's life on a yearly basis, on a regular basis, cycles of activity, can they be integrated into the castle's life? Could it become a platform to elevate these traditions? Could it be a place where new traditions begin, where the community can come together and engage with one another in this historic environment? As a catalyst for culture, commerce, and community, the castle can move away from just being a tourist destination and being fully integrated into the lives of local people and supporting their desire to make the most of their home. And I think that's a really valuable thing. I think also too that it can be a financially secure situation, especially with this level of innovation and this imaginative approach. We'd be able to think creatively and really take hold of the opportunities provided by each castle. But more on the finances, because I think this is an important question. I've mentioned the challenges that many national organizations are currently facing, and their primary income comes through tourism or grant money. Grant money through the National Heritage Lottery Fund. There is also government monies. But as we know, the government in the United Kingdom is struggling financially. There was talk recently of the IMF maybe bailing out Britain. Now that doesn't seem to have happened, but we're not far away from that. I think that's the point. And these grants are not going to be around forever. They're going to be harder and harder to get. So we're following a different model, which allows us to operate much more independently from government and these grant bodies' oversight, which I think is quite important because not only it allows us to be dynamic and flexible and take advantage of the opportunities before us, but as many of us have felt, these organizations, not only are they struggling financially, but they have, in some cases, they have really neglected their duty. They've tried to deconstruct the history of these places, tried to undermine our sense of home with them and problematize them and really give them over to other interests and groups. They've undermined a community's connection with their own heritage and history. And so we would be free from those constraints in many respects. And to do this, we are following the model of a French organization, an organization which has succeeded quite well in castle restorations. May I share with you D'Artagnan's? And let's put this into English. So we can see that they have used crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is a platform by which people donate to specific projects. So D'Artagnan's will say, okay, we want to buy this castle here and restore it. Please donate to this specific project. And through doing that with different castles, they have raised 11 million euros. They have saved 3 castles. That's 3 castles. And they've had 60,000 visitors at these castles since 2018. And we can see their castles here. Then they've kind of given them different vibes at the different ones, but they have worked really hard and they have secured the future of these places through mass crowdfunding and private investment. So it can be done. This isn't something which is a pipe dream. It's not something that is just imagined or airy-fairy. French organizations have achieved this by involving people on a widespread basis to donate, to get involved, to support the saving of their heritage. And they've raised an astounding amount of money, and they have saved 3 castles. And it looks like they're going to keep on building and keep on restoring French chateaus. And so we want to follow the same model. Pendragon Foundation wants to have a mixture of private investment and crowdfunding to save castles in Britain. So that is our ambition, that is our goal. But you might think, well, okay, that sounds very good, but how expensive is a castle? What are the costs involved here? How are you going to be able to raise this sort of money for restoring castles? Well, I think it's worth sharing here some castles which have been on the market maybe a few years ago and many today, because this will give you a sense of the kinds of numbers we're looking at and what we're about. And before I do that, I want to say something about our due diligence. And I hope you can see as we go through these things that we have been looking very seriously, that all that we do at Pendragon is on an evidence-based approach. We do our research, we take our time, we make sure that we're doing things properly. And so when we are developing our approach, when we get to the point where we're looking to buy and restore a castle, we will have made sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. We have research teams with people with legal knowledge and experience who are doing this fine-tuning work, this groundwork, to make sure that we do this properly and safely and in a good way. So that is kind of at the heart of much of what we're doing: innovation and responsibility. So with that in mind, let's look at some of the places that our research team have seen over the last little while. The first one I want to kind of mention is Wigmore Castle. The Wigmore Castle was a few years ago on the market. I think it was 2018, and it was on the market for several years after that point. This castle, which is a very historic one, going way back to the 12th century, was available for sale for £800,000. £800,000, so less than £1 million. I don't think many of you would have thought that there would be such an opportunity out there, but there was. And not only that, but Wigmore Castle was set on a lovely part of the countryside with land as part of it. And actually, the farm next to Wigmore Castle was also up for sale. So if someone had enough money, they could buy not just the castle, but the woodland and fields around it. And if we have a quick look at the castle, you can see it's in quite a ruined state, so it would require significant investment after the £800,000 to restore it. But as I said, restoration doesn't necessarily mean a complete restoration to its original state. It's rather thinking about, okay, when we're restoring this, what are we restoring it for? What business opportunities or community activities do we want to do in this place? Then we fit our restoration to match up with that ambition. I think in the short term, what you would see is, okay, the restoration work might start slowly and take time, but with that land, there'd be a strong emphasis on stewardship, conserving the land, perhaps growing out the wood that's in that place, this historic wood. England's rainforests, as it were, are under severe pressure, and supporting woodland initiatives is quite important to us. But there's also opportunities using the land for various activities. So I think there would be opportunities there as well that could be made the most of. Let's move on to another property. So this is Kinloch Castle. This has just gone back on to the market, and this is actually for the cheaper price of £750,000. Now, this is in quite a remote place on the west coast of Scotland, on the Isle of Rum, and it was previously up for sale and was nearly sold, but the fellow who wanted to buy it came afoul of the local community trust. The Isle of Rum only has 40 residents, but many of them were quite concerned about his plans because he wanted to turn this into a hotel, again, a tourist destination, right? And this would have not only potentially swamped the island, but also there were already kind of tourist hostels and bunkhouses run by people who are members of the community trust. So he was threatening the businesses of the local community. The Scottish government intervened and actually put a halt on the sale, respecting the wishes of the local community. And so if anyone was to take this property, they would need to, if they wanted to restore it, they would need to work with the local groups. And again, that's at the heart of the Pendragon Foundation's vision for what we're trying to do. When we're rebuilding Britain's strongholds, it's very much with an eye to, okay, these are places which are critical to the sense of home that people have, the people who live around them have. So we want to cultivate that. We want to kind of maximize that and say, we want this castle to be integrated in your lives, in our lives. Again, another Scottish island, this time the island of Shuna, which is not too far from Oban, the gateway to the Isles. And what's interesting about this one is that you can see the castle here, which is abandoned and in need of severe restoration work. I think you can see that there are trees growing out of it at the moment. But what's interesting is you get a whole island as part of the sale. It's not the castle per se, which is for sale. It's the whole island. And you get this large piece of land for £5.5 million. You also get several houses as part of this. And there is a significant number of businesses already operating on the island, including farming and fishing. I have a friend who was recently buying salmon in a supermarket and noticed that it came from Shuna. So you have high quality businesses already operating here, potentially a stream of revenue which could go into supporting the restoration work of this castle. Let's look at something quite different now, and this is Mettingham Castle, which is available for £1,600,000. What's kind of interesting about this property is it's actually the house, which is the majority of the sale here. This house is quite a nice house. It's spacious. It's got many rooms. So the castle that you're getting, the castle walls, this magnificent gatehouse that we have here, isn't really what you're buying. You're buying the house plus these historic ruins, which you've got to upkeep. So any restoration is kind of added to the house that you're buying. What's good here is you have a lot of accommodation. So if you wanted to house construction workers or volunteers, you've got somewhere already to do so. And this is in a much better location than the other two that we've just seen. Kinloch Castle and Shuna Castle are on remote Scottish islands. This is in Suffolk, so it would be much easier for people from London, let's say, or the south of England, to come and help, reducing your costs both in transporting your labour and your resources. Again, now we're back to a Scottish island, and this is Armadale Castle, which comes with a significant amount of land here for £2 million, or 2,700,000, I should say. And what's kind of interesting with this place, though, is again, it's part of a larger offer. You don't just need. You could buy this lot by itself, but the whole estate is available for £7 million, and that includes several workshops and houses. It includes large tracts of land and woodland. So there would be amazing conservation opportunities, both of the historic and natural environment, which is both are under significant threat. But again, it's in a remote place. So you're getting a start of a picture here of certain kinds of castle come with more land, and in certain parts of the world, there tends to be more castles up for sale which are ruined. There are other castles that aren't ruined. We're just looking at ruined castles here. Let's come back to that one. So this one, Castle Carey, okay, this is another Scottish castle, but this is in the southwest of Scotland. It's a fair bit easier to get to. And as you can see, it's on a large tract of land once more. But what's different about this place is it is a caravan park. So what you're really buying for £9.5 million is the campsite. A tourist destination, yes, but it is a place where there is a business already operating. Perhaps that business could be changed to have a more community and local focus. But nonetheless, it has that. And the castle, here we've got the castle, the 14th century castle, is in a ruined state. So you're buying a business plus a ruin, which is an interesting way to think about it, because most of the time we think about buying a castle to restore. But in several of these cases, you're buying an island with a castle or a business with a castle. Kind of a different mindset, and allows you to think of the creative and financial possibilities with this. So let's look at a final one just for the moment. And this one is a little bit out there. It's a little bit out there. But I wanted to show it because it really is quite an interesting place. The Pendragon Foundation's aim is to rebuild castles in Britain. And if we are successful, we want to help other organizations start up in other countries in Europe. And places like Spain have many properties which could be restored. Here we have a castle tower here. It is quite a big place. It's on 4 stories. And earlier in the week, it's changed price. Earlier in the week, it was less than £50,000. It was €50,000. Today it is registered at €90,000. So maybe there's been a reevaluation of how much they can get for this place. But this is less than £100,000 for it. Now it is a ruin, but if you wanted to restore a castle with significant land around it, then this isn't this would be an interesting opportunity. My point with kind of mentioning this is that there are opportunities out there to buy castles. It isn't as if there aren't castles out there. Moreover, there are ruins that need to be restored to secure their future, because as I've been indicating, their financial future is in peril, and more they are dislocated from communities. We believe that through crowdfunding and private investment, utilizing a volunteer organization and network, we can do this. Maybe at somewhere like one of these castles. And our ambition isn't just to stop with one castle, which would be an incredible achievement. We want to do multiple castles because we really believe that they need our love and care, and that they can be catalysts for regenerating communities. In a way, this is both a castle restoration project and trying to advance a new way or an old way of doing community together. So let's say you wanted to get involved in the Pendragon Foundation. Well, there are two primary ways that you can do this. One is by donating. You can go to our website, pendragon.foundation, and there you can find a donate page. And any donation is very, very welcome. We really appreciate any financial contribution. Of course, in the future, we're going to be crowdfunding, and that's going to be much more focused and targeted funding for specific castle projects. And that is where we really hope to raise a significant amount of money. But in the meantime, any financial contribution is very helpful, because we're currently at an early stage where we're building our organization, developing our volunteers, building our infrastructure so that when the right castle comes along, we are ready to go. We're also doing other educational activities, such as promoting knowledge and understanding of castles. We hope to run events in the future, more on that in a moment. So any financial help at this stage allows us to develop these activities and promote our mission more broadly. The other way is by offering to volunteer, to become a member of the Pendragon Foundation. And there are several teams which you can get involved with. So again, if we go to the pendragon.foundation, I will show the volunteer page. There are several teams that we are building and working with at this point. So let's go through them. What are the things that you could do if you get involved in Pendragon? First is rebuilding. We are going to need people who have architectural and construction experience who want to get involved in this project. One of the things which has jumped out at us during the research phase is that on many restoration projects, it isn't some kind of specialist builder who only works on restoration projects who is involved. Actually, normal construction companies often do a lot of restoration work. So whether you have specific heritage construction experience or are involved in construction more broadly, anyone who wants to kind of be involved when we actually get to the construction process, we're now kind of taking names and creating a list so that when we go there, we have a ready-made group who can help us. Our research team, as I've been indicating, is a big part of what we're doing at the moment. They are doing a number of things. For example, they're looking at restorations which have already happened and working out what has been successful, what hasn't gone well, and what lessons can we take from these things. Using that information, we can develop an ideal of what kind of restoration we would do or how we would go about it. We have teams who are going to be looking at all of the regulations that we will need to comply with as we go through this process. Additionally, we will be researching potential business opportunities or revenue building opportunities and developing business plans so that when we get a castle or there's an opportunity for a castle, we say, okay, we're going to buy this castle because we think it will work with this business plan here. It will allow us to do these business opportunities, and as such, we will be able to raise the income to secure its future, but also be able to run those activities which make it more integrated into community life. So these are really important things which are informing our decision making in an evidence-based way, and it's really the engine room of Pendragon. So we need people who have the ability to do research, who have some, if you have a legal background in any way, that's obviously very helpful. Also, a business background it could be helpful as well. But certainly people with a scholarly ability are also welcome to this team. We then have a finance team, and they are critical to overseeing our fundraising efforts. So, for example, they will be administering the crowdfunding campaigns. They're also making sure that our accounts are in order, that our financial situation is transparent, and that we're using our money responsibly and securely. So we have involved in that people with accountant experience, and if you have that kind of background, then we are open to you being involved in that. Next, we have our media team. And our media team is made up of people who are who have YouTube channels, who have social media, who have those skills and experience, and want to create a wide range of multimedia to promote what we're doing, and also to create materials which have an educational function. We want to promote knowledge about castles and their attendant cultures. We want to get people excited about their heritage and to understand it more fully. And so we need people who can do that kind of work, but also those who can edit videos or produce graphics. We need people who can use a camera to a high level, maybe directors, etc., etc. People with imagination and talent in media and social media. All of these people are welcome to contribute to this team. As I mentioned earlier, we're planning to do events as part of Pendragon, which have an educational but also an engaging aspect to them. These could range from local groups going to tour one of their historic buildings nearby to large-scale festival kinds of things. We want to build a team of people who are able to deliver on events, whether it's from organizing to stewarding at the front gate. We need all kinds of people to contribute to make this really work and to produce events which are informative, inspiring, whether at a small or large scale. And finally, we have our engagement team who oversee the volunteering onboarding process. They get you through that process, get you onto the right team. They're also about engaging, as I mentioned, with local educational trips, hands-on experiences, and social activities. So they really kind of form the bonds and many of the activities we'll be doing prior to the castle restoration. So these are the 6 major teams that we have in Pendragon, and we welcome anyone who wants to contribute. If you want to contribute, get in touch with us at pendragonvolunteering@gmail.com. Additionally, if there's something that you feel you could bring which we haven't thought of, or I haven't described just now, but you think, yes, that would be of benefit to the Pendragon Foundation, we also welcome you, and we would love to hear from you. This is a project where we're not trying to be prescriptive from the top. It's rather we want to empower volunteers to contribute in ways which maximize their abilities and gifts, while also supporting something which is quite meaningful. the restoration, the preservation, the elevation of Britain's castles. And so if we can find a way to do that, then we will. We will take on board what you want to do, what your interests are, what your abilities are, what your experiences are, and how they might fit in to our project. So to just give a very brief recap, the Pendragon Foundation is a voluntary organisation. We're aiming to rebuild Britain's strongholds, to transform castles into centres of culture, commerce, and community. We are following a model developed in other places where we will look for private investment and crowdfunding to buy and restore castles. We're doing this because castles are currently under threat. Their future is uncertain due to the failures of other institutions bound to old models of revenue and operation. But also, we want to reclaim castles, to restore them to being a key cornerstone of our home. We don't want them to just be tourist destinations. They're not just tourist destinations. They belong to us, and they should be integrated into our daily lives. So now there is a good opportunity for you to ask any questions. So please feel free to put your questions or comments into the chat. I believe we're on both Twitter and on YouTube. So these should come through in a few moments. So please do so. In the meantime, I will give you a little bit of a sneak peek as to what will be coming on this channel. So this is the first live stream, and our ambition is to have a live stream every couple of weeks. And these live streams will be on a range of things. There's two kind of broad strands to the live streams. On the one hand, there's going to be live streams which deal with issues surrounding restoration of castles and historic buildings today. Whether it's a topic like stewardship and conservation, how do we approach the stewardship of land surrounding a castle? How far should we go in maximizing the resources that are there to really making our focus conserving and really seeing thrive the natural environment? Alternatively, we might look at something like an issue to do with tradition and traditional building, and how far a restoration effort should seek to just restore a castle to its original self, and how far is it okay to innovate in architectural design, whether with castles or other historic buildings. Perhaps, as we've already been indicating, a broader discussion of the what would you call it, the tourist industry, and how it has positive and negative impacts upon castles and wider society. So that's kind of one strand of streams that we'll be doing. In addition to that, we're going to have streams which are more historical in their focus, having an educational aspect, looking into things like Hadrian's Wall or Iron Age hill forts, Norman towers, and questioning, okay, where do they come from? Where does that design come from? What's the history of these places? Not just in the local context, though, not just in terms of their construction, but in the broader historical narrative. So we can have a really well-rounded appreciation of the castles that we're trying to save and their place within British history, if not European history and world history. So those are going to be the live streams on the channel. We're also going to have videos from October, videos every week from members of the media team, including myself. There's a few other fellows who you'll be introduced to in time. And there will also be collaborations with other YouTubers and influencers who will bring their knowledge and enthusiasm to support Pendragon as well. So those are going to be the main things that appear on this channel moving forward. live streams and videos, videos every week, live streams every fortnight. So we have a few questions, I believe. Let's see. So we have a question from Mr. Green River. Thank you, Green River. How many people are involved already in Pendragon? So Pendragon has a team of, I would say, about 15 to 20 people at the moment operating in each of these teams. And we've already had significant interest in the last week or so, with potentially another 10 people coming on board already. So this is, it's a small operation, but we've already managed to build a significant structure with people working quite well within it. And we're looking to build upon that. So thank you, Green River. Much appreciated. Are there any other questions? We have a bit more time for it, so I will just wait and see what people have to say. I will. Oh, here we go. Michael has a question. So, thank you, Michael, for your question. Love the project. One of the big questions I want to know is when you'll have the funding to get going and when we can see the results of your work. This is a good question because as we've seen, although castles are not necessarily astronomical in their initial cost, right? They're not £100 million to buy. They are significant amounts of money, and it's not something which could just be purchased willy-nilly, and most of us wouldn't have that kind of money. So I think it's reasonable to say, okay, it's not something which is going to happen next month or in 2 months' time. It's going to take a lot of hard work to raise that amount of money. And following that, you also have the additional costs of upkeep and restoration afterwards. So a large amount of capital is going to be needed to get this project off the ground. So I think the answer to your question depends on two things. One is our ability to promote our project. If we can get this organization and our mission widely known, then we will be able to build a network which is big enough to support raising a large amount of money. That's the crux of it. So if we are able to reach like 1 million people by this time next year, if 1 million people know who we are, then we are in a significant place then, right? Because if 1 million people each donate £5, £10, you're able to raise significant money to buy and restore castles. So that's quite imperative for us, but it's also imperative, like an ask to you guys, and saying if you believe in this project, one way you can support it, even if you decide not to donate, if you decide not to volunteer, maybe you don't have the time, or it's just not a possibility, maybe you live in another country, you can promote this and you can share it. And the more it's shared, the more people endorse what we're doing, the more likely we are to succeed. So that's one aspect of it. And when I say like and share, yes, that's on social media, right? But it's also something which can be done in person. We could encourage local groups to come in and support what we're trying to do. Maybe your local history society or a trust which is connected to a castle, or maybe you know people who are very passionate about history. Any of these connections is valuable, and we would really embrace that. The other kind of factor here is if a castle's the right castle, because with crowdfunding, you can't preempt how that money, you raise it with that project. And so if a castle becomes available, which we think, yes, we have the infrastructure here, and we believe that we could raise the right amount of money for this place, and it's available and it just ticks all those boxes, then we need to go for that castle. Now, we need to get to a certain point before we could do that. And I've kind of indicated that. But we're not just going to go for any castle. We're not just going to rush into something which isn't the right thing to restore in the way that we're trying to do. We can only do this if we do it right. So that might mean that even if we have the ability and capacity to do it, we might have to wait a while until the right castle comes along. So I can't give you an exact date, and I can't give you an exact timeline. It's rather that there are certain things which need to fall into place for us to be able to do that. And so that's what we're going to be working on in the next 6 months to a year, is building up our volunteers, building our network, and really having all the research in place so that we can go for that castle when it's there. I hope that answers your question, Michael. If you have a follow-up, please feel free to put that in. But yes, thank you. We have a comment from Sino-Lit, James Sino-Lit, who is a member of the Pendragon, and I'm very grateful for his support. You will be seeing videos by him on this channel in the future. He agrees about the current custodians undercutting history. Went to an event at Hastings once, and they managed to take the wind out of any enthusiasm anyone has about these castles. We need to think in terms of centuries for this kind of thing. Rome wasn't built in a day. I think there is a point there as well, that although we want to restore castles in the next few years, what we're doing here is planting the seeds for something which is a much longer legacy in terms of the integration of the castle with the community, securing its future for future generations to enjoy, but also really trying to have a sort of catalyst for local activity, for a community to exist in a way which is engaging with both its heritage and the current moment in a bit of a different way, in a new way. We're trying out, we're being a vanguard for new ways of doing community. So I think that in itself is something that's very exciting, and I really believe that could be something which has a legacy long after I'm around. Michael replies, of course, thank you for answering. Are you reaching out to networking with the orgs and people such as history groups? So we've already started doing some of this, but again, we are a small organization. So if we can get more people involved, then we will have more ability to do this. We will have more capacity to reach out to more groups and advertise what we're trying to do. There's also an aspect of how we go about this. So it's not just about contacting them in a cold way. To some extent, we need to do a few things first. We need to have maybe a few events first, or publications, or something which shows, that gives us a bit of a history, a bit of evidence about who we are, what we can do, that we're a serious organization. And then we can start to really advertise to groups, because then they can say, oh, that's that group that ran that event, and yes, that was good. So we can see that they can organize things and get involved. So we will be growing the network, and we will be contacting people. We need to build that capacity, though. That's really critical. So it's something that will grow as the organization grows. Thank you again for your question. We have maybe another 10 minutes here. So please, if you have a comment or a question, a suggestion, an idea, please put it in the conversation. I'm more than happy to respond. Okay, here we've got another comment or question here. So thank you again, Michael. Do you have people with skills such as carpentry and masonry and so forth that would be needed for the restorations? Well, we would definitely need people like that. So if you or people you know have those skills, then yes, please get in touch. And we already have some people who uh, have experience on restoration projects, particularly of castles. So we have people with those skills from architecture to craftsmen, but we're looking for more people to do that because this is going to be a major job. So if you have those skills or know people, then yes, we would be very interested in talking. And again, we'll be expanding that roster as we go. Just have a quick drink. It's really fantastic to see so many people watching. It's very encouraging, and I'm very grateful to all of you for your time this evening. And as I say, we'll be doing more live streams in the future, and we'll be having in our live streams. We'll also update on significant markers with our with what we're doing, so you will be able to keep up to date with everything we're doing through our YouTube channel. Our website will also have a newsletter function in due course, so you'll be able to sign up to the newsletter to hear about what we are doing. So there's many ways to find out what Pendragon's up to, and whether you are a volunteer or just want to come along to events or support what we're doing, you'll be able to do so in due course. Let's see. Is there any further questions at this point? Let's see. Oh, we've got Michael again. Thank you, Michael. You are engaging fully and in a very thoughtful way, and I very much appreciate that. I'm incredibly curious about the project, looking forward to seeing how it develops. If I come across people who may be able to help more deeply, I'll sure to send them your way. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that immensely. Can I also ask, this is the first time we have done a stream on both Twitter and YouTube. If you're able to comment on either of these platforms, could you let me know if the stream has worked well on the platform that you are watching it on? We are very keen to keep streaming on these platforms moving forward on both, and also potentially opening up other social media accounts as well in the future. I believe that Instagram is something that we'd be very keen to watch to do, because I think there's a lot of opportunity with going to castles and sharing information about castles again. So again, once we get that going, we'll be able to let you know. Thank you, guys. That's really helpful to let me know that. So that is good. Well, if there are no more questions, I will only just say again that if you want to help out the Pendragon Foundation, we are looking for volunteers. Please message Pendragon volunteer. Let me get the name right. Sorry, it's been a long stream. It's been a long stream. I want to make sure I give you the right email address. So it is. Yes, I was right. pendragonvolunteering@gmail.com. pendragonvolunteering@gmail.com. One of our team will receive your email and we'll have a quick chat about you, chat with you about what you might want to get involved with. And it's if you don't have the time to volunteer or are unable, you can either donate to us or you can just follow us on Twitter and social media. And if you're able to like, repost, quote tweet, comment, that really helps us too. We want to grow this organization because fundamentally we want to rebuild Britain's strongholds. So thank you so much for your time. If you have any further questions after this stream, please leave a comment and we will get back to you. Till next time, thank you guys and have a good rest of your evening.